The entire auction house's gaze converged on Song Tai, standing at the auction platform almost simultaneously. The expressions on their faces were a mix of shock and astonishment. They had imagined anyone might bid for the calamity-repelling pill, but none had expected that even Song Tai, the overseer of Myriad Elephant City and a member of a super sect, would make an offer. This figure, who had maintained a detached demeanor since his arrival, calmly watching the dynasties vie for supremacy, could no longer keep his aloofness at this moment. The faces of Feng Song, Mu Lin, and the others also showed surprise. Mu Lin shook his head regretfully. Since even Song Tai had spoken, it wasn't a matter of whether they could match his price. Even if they could, it would be unwise to challenge him. In this city, Song Tai held the highest authority. No matter what great dynasty one came from, to him, the prestige of a super dynasty was nothing more than a joke. Compared to Mu Lin's regret, Feng Song's face looked significantly darker. If anyone else had tried to buy Lin Dong's calamity-repelling pill, he might have been able to use the Stormcloud dynasty to intimidate them, but now, the bidder was Song Tai. The auction house erupted in whispers. Though many dynasties were displeased that Song Tai had single-handedly taken all 3 precious calamity-repelling pills, no one dared voice their discontent. Besides, none could match Song Tai's price. In the midst of the murmurs, Lin Dong snapped out of his daze. He looked at Song Tai, who was eyeing him, and a smile appeared on his face. He cupped his hands and said, "Since Master Song has made an offer, how could I refuse? Under different circumstances, gifting Master Song a pill would be no big deal." Upon hearing these tactful words, many silently praised Lin Dong. What a smooth talker he was. Even Song Tai, who was usually composed, couldn't help but smile. Whether Lin Dong was being sincere or not, his words were undeniably pleasing. Having agreed, Lin Dong wasted no time. With a wave of his hand, the 3 calamity-repelling pills flew towards Song Tai on the auction platform. Lin Dong wasn't worried about Feng Song causing trouble. If he tried to interfere at this point, Song Tai would be the first to deal with him. Song Tai caught the 3 pills, inspected them carefully, and his smile deepened. Calamity-repelling pills were rare even in the major auction houses of the Eastern Profound region, and though he had tried to buy them before, he had never succeeded. Unexpectedly, he had lucked out today. Here are 24 million Nirvana pills. Song Tai stowed away the calamity-repelling pills and waved his hand, sending a golden cosmic bag flying towards Lin Dong. A dense aura of Nirvana energy faintly emanated from it. Clearly, Song Tai had some powerful backing. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to casually produce over 24 million Nirvana pills, a sum that even mid- to low-level dynasties could not gather with all their resources. Lin Dong took the cosmic bag without inspecting it and held it casually in his hand. Then, with a smiling glance at the now dark-faced Feng Song, he grinned. "Now I should be qualified, right? 24 million. I want that heaven-tier spiritual treasure." Lin Dong smiled and raised the cosmic bag, his eyes fixed on Feng Song. He added with a smirk, "This is everything I have. If you can outbid me, the treasure is yours." Feng Song's face grew even darker, and his glare towards Lin Dong became almost murderous. "Master Song," Lin Dong ignored Feng Song's venomous gaze and looked towards Song Tai on the auction platform with a smile. "Feng Song, if you cannot offer a better price than Lin Dong, then the heaven-tier spiritual treasure belongs to him," Song Tai said with a faint smile. Having just received 3 calamity-repelling pills from Lin Dong, Song Tai was clearly in a good mood, his previously indifferent expression softening with a hint of warmth. Feng Song's eyes flickered as his fists slowly clenched. The audience looked on with some shock at the unfolding scene. No one had expected that Lin Dong would, in this setting, outshine the 4 super dynasties. "Lin Dong, your tactics are impressive, but don't get too comfortable just yet." Just as Song Tai was about to announce Lin Dong as the winner of the heaven-tier spiritual treasure, Feng Song's icy voice rang out. He lifted his head, his gaze as chilling as the deepest winter. "You really think I have no other means?" Feng Song's lips twisted into a sinister smile. Lin Dong narrowed his eyes as he saw Feng Song suddenly stretch his hand towards the Forest Dynasty's camp, coldly shouting, Wu Tuo, give me your 15 million Nirvana pills. This statement stunned everyone, their eyes wide with disbelief. The Forest Dynasty and the Stormcloud Dynasty were not known to be on good terms. Why would the former hand over such a vast amount of Nirvana pills to the latter? Could it be that Feng Song had lost his mind? But as the crowd reeled from shock, Wu Tuo of the Forest Dynasty stood up with a smile and, under the stunned gazes of the onlookers, tossed over a cosmic bag. Wu Tuo you. Both Mu Lin and Imo Fan were shocked at Wu Tuo's actions. It became clear to them that the Stormcloud Dynasty and the Forest Dynasty had secretly joined forces without anyone knowing. The four super dynasties in Myriad Elephant City had always been hostile toward one another, their relationships far from friendly, let alone forming alliances. They were well aware that they were each other's fiercest competitors. But just when everyone thought this dynamic would remain unchanged, they discovered that the Stormcloud Dynasty and the Forest Dynasty had formed a secret alliance. This was certainly not good news for the Solitary Moon Dynasty and the Blazing Fire Dynasty. Feng Song, don't forget the reward you promised afterward, Wu Tuo said with a faint smile, tossing out a cosmic bag under the astonished gazes of everyone present. Don't worry, I'll give you every bit, Feng Song replied coldly, then turned his twisted gaze toward the frowning Lin Dong. With a sinister smile, he said, You've pushed the Stormcloud Dynasty this far. I'll give you that. But don't think you'll be the one laughing at the end. What the Stormcloud Dynasty desires, no one can stop us from obtaining. You have 24 million, but I'll bid 30 million. Fight me? What are you compared to me? Feng Song's face was contorted with rage, his voice almost hysterical. His offer had gone beyond what he initially planned. 30 million Nirvana pills for a heaven-tier spiritual treasure was exorbitant, but Lin Dong had left him no way out. Lin Dong furrowed his brows at this development. He hadn't expected Feng Song to have such a trump card. There was no way he could match the combined wealth of two super dynasties. With a carefree shrug, he laughed. In that case, congratulations. Hearing Lin Dong's laugh only made Feng Song's already pale face turn even paler. Despite winning, there was no joy on his face. His entire body trembled with rage. What should have been an easy victory had spiraled out of control because of Lin Dong, and the cost was far too high. Master Song, announced the result. Feng Song took a deep breath, his voice cold and laced with murderous intent. It was clear to everyone that he was barely containing his fury. Song Tai frowned, glancing at Lin Dong with a hint of regret. While he favored Lin Dong far more than Feng Song, there was nothing he could do in such a public situation. Interfering would risk trouble with the super sects, and that was not a risk he could afford. The final price for the Black Dragon Roaring Heaven seal is 30 million Nirvana pills. Song Tai's voice echoed through the auction house, signaling the end of the bidding war. The cosmic bag filled with 30 million Nirvana pills flew into Song Tai's hands, and with a wave of his hand, the black iron seal transformed into a streak of black light, which Feng Song snatched with a crazed expression. The moment Feng Song obtained the heaven-tier spiritual treasure, his face twisted into a malevolent grin. He whirled around, his eyes locking onto Lin Dong with murderous intensity. Waves of violent primordial energy surged from him in a frenzy. Lin Dong, I'll make you beg for death today. Feng Song's roar, laced with chilling intent, sent a shiver through everyone in the auction house. It was clear that he had been pushed to his limit, and now, with the heaven-tier spiritual treasure in hand, he couldn't hold back any longer. Auction rules forbid fighting. However, just as Feng Song was about to strike, Song Tai's calm voice came from the auction platform. Feng Song's murderous intent froze in place. His clenched fists trembled as he shot a venomous glare at Song Tai. Then, with a swift movement, he prepared to storm out of the auction house. Lin Dong, get out here. We can't fight inside the auction house, but I'll slaughter you the moment you step outside. Just as Feng Song's furious shout echoed through the hall, Song Tai's voice rang out again, still calm. I'm afraid that won't be possible. I'm in a bad mood today, so all fighting within Myriad Elephant City is strictly prohibited. Thud. Feng Song, who was just about to rush out of the auction house, staggered upon hearing those words and coughed up a mouthful of blood in rage. The auction house fell into a dead silence. Everyone exchanged bewildered glances, their faces reflecting an odd mix of disbelief and amusement as they turned their gazes to the indifferent Song Tai on the auction platform. Although Myriad Elephant City was under the supervision of the super sects, and its rules were upheld by its overseers, everyone knew that a city like this was full of unruly and arrogant individuals. Fights inevitably broke out, despite strict regulations. In such cases, the overseers usually turned a blind eye, and never before had a rule been laid down forbidding all fighting within the city. So when everyone heard Song Tai declare that all combat was banned in Myriad Elephant City for the day, just because he was in a bad mood, they were utterly dumbfounded. Expressions of sympathy filled the auction house as countless people glanced at Feng Song, who had just spewed blood in fury. It was evident to all that Song Tai was deliberately targeting him. Even Lin Dong was momentarily stunned by Song Tai's words. He hadn't expected him to say something like that. After a brief pause, he couldn't help but smile. This guy was quite something. Selling those 3 calamity-repelling pills to Song Tai had certainly paid off in an unexpected way. Mu Lin and the others, struggling to keep their expressions neutral, couldn't suppress their smirks. Song Tai, don't push it too far. Amid the countless gazes, Feng Song finally turned around, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. His expression was so contorted it barely looked human. If not for his fear of Song Tai's status, he would have attacked him on the spot. Song Tai, while you're the overseer of Myriad Elephant City, you have no obligation to interfere in the conflicts between dynasties. If word of this reaches the super sects, how will you explain yourself? Meng Lai stood up, his tone cold and threatening. As the overseer, I make the rules here. If you're dissatisfied, feel free to report it to the super sects, Song Tai responded, his expression calm as ever. He glanced indifferently at Feng Song and Meng Lai before continuing, however, until orders come down from the super sects, I am still in charge here. Should you violate my rules, I have the authority to revoke your participation in the 100 Dynasty War. Song Tai. Feng Song's face twisted in rage. He shouted, the Stormcloud Dynasty also has allies within the super sections. Don't push your luck. The rules are set. What you choose to do is your business, but how I respond is mine, Song Tai replied calmly, hands clasped behind his back. You. Feng Song trembled with fury, his eyes turning bloodshot. Yet, he took a deep breath, barely suppressing his rage. No matter what, Song Tai held the highest authority in Myriad Elephant City, and with a single word, he could strip any dynasty of their right to compete. Though the Stormcloud Dynasty had its own backing, distant allies were of little help in the immediate situation. Despite his boiling anger, Feng Song's self-control was impressive. He managed to restrain his fury, though the murderous intent in his eyes was almost tangible. Turning sharply, his venomous gaze locked onto Lin Dong. Lin Dong, don't think this is over. Song Tai might protect you in Myriad Elephant City, but in 2 days, when the 100 Dynasty War begins, he won't be able to interfere in matters between dynasties. Once you leave this city, I'll make sure you understand the consequences of crossing the Stormcloud Dynasty. Feng Song's voice was chilling, full of murderous intent that echoed through the auction house, sending a shiver through everyone present. It was clear he was determined not to let Lin Dong and his companions go unscathed. Song Tai had made it obvious that he was favoring Lin Dong, and in Myriad Elephant City, no one could challenge that. However, 2 days from now, when the 100 Dynasty War commenced, Lin Dong would inevitably participate. The moment he stepped into the battleground, he would face the wrath of the Stormcloud Dynasty. Lin Dong met Feng Song's bloodshot gaze, and a trace of coldness flickered in his eyes. After a brief pause, he smirked and said softly, if that's how you feel, we'll be ready. In fact, I'm quite interested in that heaven-tier spiritual treasure of yours. Defeating you would save me a fortune in Nirvana pills. It sounds like a good deal to me. Haha, the heaven-tier spiritual treasure is in my hands. If you're bold enough, come and take it. I'll be waiting. Feng Song let out a maniacal laugh, clearly provoked by Lin Dong's seemingly arrogant words. His eyes were cold and sinister as he bared his teeth at Lin Dong. However, I'm looking forward to seeing your end in 2 days. I wonder if you'll still be this cocky then. If so, I might actually respect you a little. Let's go." With that, Feng Tsang waved his hand and stormed off, his overwhelming murderous intent trailing behind him. Meng Lai quickly followed, casting a cruel and mocking glance at Lin Dong and his group as he left. He drew his hand across his throat in a silent gesture, the meaning all too clear. As Feng Tsang and his group left, the tense atmosphere in the auction house eased slightly. Many eyes were still trained on Lin Dong and his companions, with expressions ranging from sympathy to schadenfreude, along with a hint of anticipation. Clearly, many were eagerly awaiting the showdown that would take place 2 days later when the 100 Dynasty War began. Would the Super Dynasty prevail, or would Lin Dong, the Dark Horse, emerge victorious? The answer would come soon enough. That Feng Tsang is quite arrogant. In 2 days, it's bound to be a fierce fight, Little Mink remarked with interest as he watched the crowd slowly disperse. Let's go and prepare. Since the challenge has been made, we have no choice but to accept it, Lin Dong said with a smile, his face showing no trace of fear. Although Feng Tsang's power would undoubtedly increase with the Heaven-tier spiritual treasure in hand, it was still too early to say who would emerge victorious. Turning, Lin Dong cupped his hands towards Song Tai, acknowledging the overseer's assistance. Even though Lin Dong hadn't feared a direct confrontation with Feng Tsang, having 2 days to prepare was certainly advantageous. He appreciated Song Tai's intervention. Song Tai waved dismissively, then turned away. His voice, heard only by Lin Dong, reached his ears. Lin Dong, this is as much as I can do for you. 2 days from now, the outcome will depend on your own abilities. At the very least, Feng Tsang won't be able to make any moves against you until then. Take the time to prepare. Lin Dong smiled slightly, nodded in response, and without further words, led his group, including Little Yin, out of the auction house. Mu Lin, watching Lin Dong's group leave under the scrutiny of the crowd, couldn't help but sigh. I thought this auction would lead to a confrontation between our Solitary Moon Dynasty and the Stormcloud Dynasty, but it seems we've been relegated to mere spectators. Lin Dong has truly stolen the spotlight this time. 2 days from now, they'll likely face serious trouble, Mu Hanyue said with a frown. She knew Lin Dong and his group were strong, but the Stormcloud Dynasty was a force to be reckoned with, especially now that they had obtained a Heaven-tier spiritual treasure. Even the Solitary Moon Dynasty wouldn't dare provoke them easily, and as for Lin Dong, yes, it does seem like trouble is brewing. Even Mu Lin, who had always held Lin Dong in high regard, looked grim. He sighed, "We'll just have to wait and see. The Stormcloud Dynasty is powerful. Who knows if Lin Dong and his group will make it through this time." With that, Mu Lin gestured for his companions to leave the auction house, clearly unwilling to dwell further on the matter. Myriad Elephant City was an immense metropolis, and yet within less than half an hour, the events that had unfolded in the auction house had spread like wildfire. The entire city buzzed with excitement. What was the Stormcloud Dynasty? It was the dominant super dynasty in Myriad Elephant City. Though the 4 great dynasties often clashed, everyone knew that the Stormcloud Dynasty was considered the most powerful among them. The Stormcloud Dynasty had a fearsome reputation, but Lin Dong, who had risen from a lower-tier dynasty, was no unknown figure either. Despite his humble origins, he had defeated many higher-tier dynasties. He had even single-handedly fended off the 3 lords of the Northwest region, seizing 2 inheritances from the 4 grand profound sects during the ancient treasure trove event. Afterward, he even overpowered 2 generals of the Great Qin dynasty. On top of that, at Myriad Elephant City's Nirvana Monument, 3 of Lin Dong's group claimed the top 4 spots, and that same night, Lin Dong defeated Luo Tong, who had reached the 4th Nirvana stage and held the 1st Earth class rank. Lin Dong thus became the undisputed number 1 in the Earth class. These feats were enough for people to forget his lower-tier dynasty background. Therefore, when the public learned that Lin Dong and Feng Tsang would clash in 2 days, no one thought Lin Dong was overreaching. Instead, there was a palpable sense of excitement, the kind only reserved for truly equal matches. In the eyes of many, Lin Dong, who hailed from a lesser dynasty, had already earned a reputation worthy of standing shoulder to shoulder with the super dynasties. Of course, Whether this reputation was deserved would be determined by the fierce confrontation in 2 days. If Lindong won, his name would reverberate across the ancient battleground. But if he lost, the legend of his rise would end here. This would be the first showdown between a super dynasty and an up-and-coming dark horse in the 100 Dynasty War, and the result would undoubtedly draw the attention of everyone. Under the weight of such anticipation, 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. As the morning sun spread its cool light over Myriad Elephant City, the entire city basked in its glow. Today, the city was more alive than ever. The excitement, which had been building for 2 days, had reached a fever pitch. Every person's eyes were filled with eager anticipation. They had left their respective dynasties and trained relentlessly for a year in this fiercely competitive ancient battleground. All their efforts were aimed at achieving a commendable result in the 100 Dynasty War, hoping to catch the attention of the super sects, thereby elevating the status of their dynasties. And today, after a year of preparation, the long-awaited battle was finally set to begin. Geniuses and prodigies from countless dynasties, after a year of silent cultivation, would now face off, and the victor would be declared. Who among the younger generation of the Eastern Profound Region's dynasties would rise to the top? That question would soon be answered. Amidst the city's fevered atmosphere, several figures quietly emerged from a small courtyard in the southeastern part of the city. It was Lindong and his group. Lindong looked up at the blazing sun in the sky, a smile slowly spreading across his face. This was the day he had been waiting for. An entire year. Behind him, Little Yin rested a black iron rod on his shoulder. His towering figure cast a shadow that nearly engulfed Lindong, exuding an aura of immense pressure. In contrast to Little Yan's imposing presence, Little Mink remained as laid-back as ever. His handsome face, illuminated by the sunlight, seemed almost otherworldly. However, Su Kuei and the others knew that this figure, who had only revealed his strength once, was the most enigmatic of the trio. Su Kuei glanced at the three of them and couldn't help but feel a strange sense of admiration. On the surface, Lindong didn't appear as brawny as Little Yin or as strikingly handsome as Little Mink. He might not even be the strongest among the three, yet he was undoubtedly their leader. After spending some time with them, Su Kuei had learned much about Lindong's journey in the ancient battleground. In the beginning, neither Little Yin nor Little Mink had been as powerful as they were now. Back then, it had been Lindong, seemingly the most ordinary of the three, who had taken on nearly all of the challenges alone. As Su Kuei watched Lindong raise his arms towards the sky, bathed in sunlight, he sensed an aura of fierce determination. At that moment, Lindong's brilliance seemed to eclipse even that of Little Mink and Little Yin. A sudden thought crossed Su Kuei's mind. Lindong might just become the brightest star in this ancient battleground. He turned to see Su Ro beside him, her large eyes fixed on Lindong's figure. Her delicate face was tinged with a soft blush, and the sight of Lindong standing there with his arms raised gave her a sense that he could shoulder even the weight of the heavens. That feeling of strength seemed even more reliable than the back of her older brother, who had always protected her. Cough. Su Kuei cleared his throat, snapping Su Ro out of her reverie. Startled, she quickly looked down, her tender ears turning a deep shade of red. Su Kuei sighed helplessly. Over the past 2 days, thanks to Little Mink's help, Su Ro had finally managed to gain some control over the immense power within her. Although there were still limits, the sudden burst of strength she could now wield was frighteningly powerful. Yet despite her newfound abilities, her soft and gentle demeanor hadn't changed much, and Su Kuei couldn't help but worry if she was ready for the harsh realities of the 100 Dynasty War. Let's go. Su Kuei's cough brought Lindong back to reality. A bright smile crept across Lindong's face as he waved his hand and opened the door. Without hesitation, his companions followed closely behind him. At the eastern gate of Myriad Elephant City, a massive crowd had gathered. A sea of black heads stretching endlessly from within the city, flowing like a dark tide over the hills. The entire area was covered in this wave of people. Beyond the city walls was a high slope, and beyond that slope, an enormous light screen stretched out in a ring, reaching as far as the eye could see. Looking through the light screen, one could glimpse a vast, untamed forest. There was a faint, foreboding atmosphere wafting from it, a reminder of the brutal nature of the 100 Dynasty War. Many dark horses had risen to prominence in this place, while countless geniuses had perished here, their deaths serving to elevate the fame of others. On top of the city walls, representatives from various dynasties had taken their places. At the very front were the most eye-catching, the 4 super dynasties. As countless gazes swept across the scene, they all converged on the front of the Stormcloud dynasty's contingent, where Feng Tsang stood with his hands behind his back. His expression no longer displayed the fiery rage from 2 days ago, but instead a dark and sinister gloom had settled over his face. The one constant was the cold, murderous intent still flickering in his eyes. Many people exchanged looks, feeling a surge of excitement in their blood. Soon, they would enter the core region, where the final stage of competition would unfold, and where they would witness a clash of titans. Whoosh! While countless hearts pounded with excitement, the sound of rushing wind suddenly echoed from the sky. Several figures descended upon a section of the city wall, drawing gasps of surprise. "It's Lindong and his group." The exclamations spread quickly, and in an instant, countless eyes locked onto the newly arrived figures. In front of the Stormcloud dynasty, Feng Tsang's already dark face turned even more sullen. Slowly, he turned his head, his gaze cold and sharp like a blade as it pierced toward Lindong. Lindong raised his head, meeting Feng Tsang's gaze without a hint of fear. As their eyes locked, the air around them seemed to freeze under the weight of their mutual killing intent. Feng Tsang's lips twisted into a sneer as he extended his thumb and then violently jerked it downward, his eyes filled with venom. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. It was clear that Feng Tsang was determined to see Lindong and his companions dead this time. Seeing Feng Tsang's provocative gesture, Little Yan's murderous aura surged. His hand tightened around the iron rod on his shoulder, ready to make a move, but Lindong waved his hand, signaling for him to stand down. "Everyone!" Just as Lindong stopped Little Yan, a deep, commanding voice rang out from above. The crowd looked up to see Song Tai hovering in midair. "Anyone who holds a Nirvana seal is qualified to enter the core region. But before you go, let me remind you, once you enter, there's no turning back. What awaits inside is the most brutal competition. There will be no mercy, only victors." Song Tai's sharp gaze swept over the crowd, causing many to pale and hesitate. As you all know, the super sects only choose the best. The only way to prove your worth is by defeating your rivals and taking their Nirvana seals. As you absorb more Nirvana seals, the mark on your palm will gradually turn purple gold. Only when you fully possess a purple gold Nirvana seal will you qualify for a place on the Nirvana Golden ranking and the attention of the super sects. Lindong's eyes narrowed as he listened. He hadn't expected the 100 Dynasty War to be so merciless. To reach the Nirvana Golden ranking, one had to seize the Nirvana seals from others. It was like raising venomous creatures, placing countless poisonous insects in a jar, and only the strongest survivor would emerge as the most exceptional. The 100 Dynasty War recognizes only victory and defeat, not life or death. If you're ready for this, then begin. Today marks the moment when your year of training will be tested. Song Tai gestured toward the massive light screen connecting heaven and earth. His deep voice echoed in everyone's ears. Countless people raised their heads, their gazes fixed on the light screen. A spark of fanaticism ignited in their eyes. At this point, retreat was no longer an option. "Go!" A low roar erupted from somewhere in the crowd. Instantly, the earth trembled as a terrifying wave of people surged forward like a swarm of locusts, flying through the air in a desperate charge toward the light screen. "Lindong, come with me. Today is the day you die." From atop the city walls, Feng Tsang roared toward the sky, his eyes bloodshot. With a final murderous glare at Lindong, he shot forward, leading the Stormcloud dynasty's forces, their overwhelming killing intent crashing forward like a tidal wave as they rushed into the light screen. Lindong watched Feng Tsang's retreating figure, lightly licking his lips. With a smile, he asked, "Everyone ready?"
Yes.
Behind him, his companions grinned, their eyes gleaming with battle intent. completely unafraid despite the fact that they would soon be facing one of the most powerful super dynasties in Myriad Elephant City. Let's go. With a thunderous laugh, Lin Dong cupped his hands towards Song Tai in the sky. Master Song, thanks for your help, but from here on, we'll handle it ourselves. As his laughter rang out, Lin Dong shot forward, cutting through the air as he rushed toward the light screen. Behind him, Little Yin and the others followed closely, their battle spirits soaring. In the sky, Song Tai watched Lin Dong's group charge into the light screen, a trace of admiration flashing in his eyes. He knew that if they could survive the coming trials, their names would resound throughout the core region. Whether they would emerge as dragons or worms would depend on this battle. As they crossed through the light screen, everyone felt an overwhelming sense of danger wash over them. The atmosphere was so oppressive that even their primordial energy roiled within them, forcing them to stop and regain their composure. Once their movements slowed, countless pairs of eyes immediately took in their new surroundings. Faces stiffened as they realized where they had arrived. Despite being separated from the outside world by just a thin light screen, this place felt entirely different. Outside, the sun was warm and gentle, but here, there was a distinct chill in the air. The sky was not a serene blue but instead took on a dark red hue. As they looked up, the eerie red glow reflected in their eyes, adding an unnatural sense of foreboding. Beneath that crimson sky stretched an endless expanse of primeval forest. Towering trees, each hundreds of feet tall, stood in an unbroken chain, stretching beyond sight. From deep within the forest came earth-shaking roars of beasts, each one filled with an overwhelming savagery. This was a land of peril. The massive influx of people from Myriad Elephant City shattered the peace in the area. The sky was filled with silhouettes of figures floating in midair, their eyes burning with excitement as they gazed at this land where their final battle would take place. They knew that elsewhere in this vast region, many other powerful figures would soon be pouring in as well. Before long, they would meet in the core area, where fierce battles would erupt as they fought to seize each other's nirvana seals. The victors and the defeated would be determined by the fruits of their year-long training. But before those battles, they would first witness a collision that would set their blood on fire. Whoosh! As countless gazes fixed on the sky, a group of figures brimming with killing intent darted through the air and landed above the wild forest nearby. Their cold, ghost-like eyes stared intently at the entrance to the light screen behind them. Lin Dong, come out here. Feng Tsang's low roar echoed, thick with murderous intent. Are you that eager to give away your heaven-tier spiritual treasure? A voice laughed from within the light screen. Moments later, Lin Dong and his group emerged, stepping fully into the core region. As Feng Tsang watched Lin Dong set foot on the ground, a crazed smile slowly spread across his face. He knew that the moment Lin Dong stepped into this place, there was no turning back. Now, he could do as he pleased to make this man, who had enraged him to no end, suffer a fate worse than death. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Lin Dong and his companions descended from the sky, landing on a giant tree not far from Feng Tsang. There was no trace of fear on their faces, only smiles. Not far away, the Solitary Moon Dynasty, Forest Dynasty, and Blazing Fire Dynasty, three of the super dynasties from Myriad Elephant City, had also appeared. However, none of them showed any intention of leaving. Instead, they watched the confrontation with burning interest. This was a showdown that even they couldn't ignore. I don't know where you got the confidence to enter the core region, but your courage surprises me. After the 100 Dynasty War ends, I'll make sure your corpse is sent back to your dynasty. Feng Tsang sneered at Lin Dong, his voice filled with malice. Lin Dong paid no attention to the annoying man. His gaze swept over the powerful figures from the Stormcloud Dynasty before speaking softly. Feng Tsang is mine. I'll take care of Ming Lai, Little Yin declared, waving his iron rod and producing a deep whooshing sound in the air. What? Leaving the weakest for me? Are you two really that confident you're stronger than me now? Little Mink narrowed his eyes playfully. This is the core region, and the experts from the super dynasties are bound to be watching. Be cautious, and try not to reveal too much of your strength, Lin Dong said with a slight smile. Also, when you deal with Luotong, Keep an eye on Su Ro and the others. The Stormcloud dynasty has gathered a lot of strong fighters, and we're still outnumbered. Little Mink smirked. Don't worry. That girl isn't as weak as you think anymore. Her sudden bursts of power would even give you a hard time. I'm no match for Big Brother Lindong, Su Ro said softly, blushing at the compliment. Su Ro, it's up to you to protect your brother and the others. We won't be able to watch out for them ourselves, Lindong said with a smile. Su Ro clenched her small fists tightly, determination flashing in her eyes. She was determined not to hold them back this time. Seeing Su Ro's resolve, Lindong finally stepped forward under the countless watching eyes. As he moved, a powerful surge of primordial energy roared out from his body like a tidal wave. Third Nirvana stage? Is this all you've got? Do you think you can take on someone like me, who's far beyond the weaklings you've faced before? Feng Tsang burst into mocking laughter as he sensed the energy pouring from Lindong. I've already reached the peak of the fourth Nirvana stage. If this is your limit, I must say, I'm disappointed. Feng Tsang took a step forward, and the overwhelming power of the fourth Nirvana stage surged out unchecked, flooding the sky. The crushing pressure it created bore down on Lindong with a force that seemed impossible to resist. Under such a powerful release of energy, Lindong's aura seemed to pale in comparison. It was clear that Feng Tsang's raw power was superior. If that's what you believe, then I'm afraid you'll be the one disappointed, Lindong replied with a calm smile. With a thought, his primordial energy, spiritual energy, and devouring force all surged simultaneously, flooding into the cosmic array above his Naiwan palace. Rumble. Low, rumbling sound waves traveled through Lindong's meridians, spreading out to every corner of his body. His form froze for a brief moment before a strange gray-black energy exploded from within him. The gray-black energy didn't appear particularly massive, nor did it compare to Feng Tsang's sky-shattering power. But as soon as it emerged, the crushing primordial energy pressure bearing down on Lindong from Feng Tsang disintegrated in an instant. Within a radius of several dozen feet around Lindong, the oppressive force vanished entirely. What kind of energy is this? Feng Tsang's expression twisted in shock. The sudden change in the battle left everyone shocked. No one understood why Lindong's previously pure primordial energy had suddenly transformed into this strange, new energy. However, it was clear that this energy was superior to mere primordial energy, as it had completely shattered Feng Tsang's powerful fourth Nirvana stage energy with ease. This Lindong, as expected, has something up his sleeve. Mu Lin and the others watched with wide eyes, astonished by this unexpected turn of events. Clearly, none of them had anticipated Lindong possessing such a powerful move. Now this is getting interesting. Anything less would have been too boring. A flash of surprise crossed Feng Tsang's face before he gave a cold, sinister smile. In the next moment, his eyes turned sharp and icy, and with a flick of his long, slender fingers, he drew them downward. Swish, swish. As Feng Tsang's fingers moved, a fierce wind howled to life. Two massive wind blades, each dozens of meters long, formed at his fingertips and sliced through the air like lightning, heading straight for Lindong. Whoosh! Lindong's figure flickered, transforming into a blurred afterimage as he shot forward. The gray-black fusion energy swirled around him, coiling tightly over his body. Like a meteor, he charged headlong at the two enormous wind blades. Boom! A dull explosion resounded through the air as the two wind blades exploded on impact. A gray-black shadow darted out from the aftermath and appeared before Feng Tsang in the blink of an eye. Lindong's fist, like a raging storm, shot out with blinding speed, unleashing a barrage of brutal strikes aimed at Feng Tsang's entire body. Humph! Facing Lindong's fierce assault, Feng Tsang merely snorted coldly. His hand signs changed, and the massive surge of primordial energy before him transformed into swirling wind cyclones, forming a barrier that shielded him from Lindong's rain of punches. Bang! 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 Each time Lindong's fists collided with the wind barrier, a sharp, piercing sound rang out. The impacts merged into a cacophony, and from above, violent shockwaves rippled through the air, spreading out from the fierce collision. In just a few short seconds, the two had clashed head-on dozens of times with terrifying intensity, their battle utterly captivating the crowd. The entire area fell into stunned silence as countless eyes watched the scene unfold. Many faces paled at the sight. The sheer shockwaves from the battle alone were enough to make even third Nirvana stage experts' hearts race in terror. It was hard to believe that Lin Dong, with his third Nirvana stage power, could stand his ground against Feng Tsang, who had reached the peak of the fourth Nirvana stage. Neither of them had even used any powerful martial techniques yet. Their clash was purely a contest of strength and foundation. This man, daring to face the wrath of a super dynasty, clearly had abilities that ordinary people could not fathom. Boom! Another thunderous collision erupted, sending powerful gales of primordial energy across the battlefield. Both Lin Dong and Feng Tsang were forced to retreat several steps, their breaths slightly heavier than before. Yet the ferocity in their eyes only grew more intense. Menglai, take your men and finish them off. Leave Lin Dong to me. Feng Tsang snarled, his face twisted with malice. Humph! Hearing this, Menglai's lips curled into a cruel smile. His gaze, filled with bloodlust, turned toward Little Yin and the others standing nearby. Boom! With a single step, Little Yin swung his iron rod, tearing through the air as an overwhelming aura of bloodthirsty ferocity spread out. In that moment, it was as though a slumbering beast had been awakened. Second brother, I'm going in. Bloodlust surged in Little Yan's eyes as he bellowed. Without hesitation, his massive frame, casting a large shadow, charged toward Menglai like an unstoppable force. At that moment, the battle between the two sides erupted in full force.